All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is Toby Shifsky. I am the Vice President of Dearborn Real Estate Education. And today we have two very special guests with us, two really superstars in the instruction world. I have none other than Amy Klingensmith and Charles Lee. They're here from Kaplan, and they're going to share some secrets. They're going to share some trade secrets about what they do in order to really, find and secure top flight instruction. And so today's episode is the 5 traits of a 5-star real estate instructor. Charles and Amy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Well, let me do this. I'd love to talk a little bit about Amy and Charles. And so let me just make sure everybody knows who we're here with. Amy Klingensmith comes to us with over 20 years of experience as a dedicated realtor. Amy serves clients in North Carolina and South Carolina, combining her deep knowledge of real estate market with passion for real estate instruction. For the past decade, she's also been a part of Kaplan, where she currently holds the position of senior faculty manager, leading and supporting talented instructors like Charles. As a real estate instructor, she enjoys guiding others in their professional growth and ensuring courses meet the highest standards. Amy is I would say, a lifelong learner and continues to astound us with the education she takes herself and the professionalism at which she carries herself as our really senior faculty manager of a staff of over 75 instructors. Amy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. And Charles Lee, since starting his real estate career in Durham, North Carolina, in 2016, Charles has been dedicated to leveraging technology to streamline complex transactions, saving his clients vital time and energy. With over 15 years of local residency, his deep roots in the community are reflected in his service as vice chair for housing for New Hope. His professional foundation as a former hospitality operations manager instilled in him a passion for creating problem solving, a skill he now uses to help others navigate the triangle market with ease. Today, Charles channels his expertise into coaching and teaching, helping countless agents launch their rewarding careers. Known for his high energy and purposeful instruction, he has a unique knack for breaking down large concepts into bite-sized actionable insights using real-life examples. Whether he is mentoring a new agent or guiding a client through a sale, Charles remains driven by commitment to insightful service and professional excellence. Charles, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Toby. I need that as my alarm clock to wake up in the morning.
You got a sad life if I'm your alarm clock. All right, let's do this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to do this, open this up to us, and I'm going to jump right in. We have a lot of people on. As a matter of fact, everybody who's on this attending this webinar, let me do this. I'm going to ask a quick poll question. We do this at the start of all of our webinars, and this webinar is going to be like 35 to 45 minutes. You're going to have a chance to ask questions. You can at any time in the chat. We have people on staff helping us. We have Chris Robinson, who's a national account director for sales on. He can answer some questions. We have Jamie Cash, who's helping us. She's our producer. She puts these together. She can answer questions. And of course, we are capable of answering questions too, as you have two of the finest instructors we have right here. Can answer questions on the fly. So feel free to ask questions, safe environment. But just remember, if you ask a chat question, your name is on there. All of our polls are anonymous, so your name is not attached to the poll. We'd really like to know. In fact, let me do this. Who's in the audience today? I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. If you'd play along, this is anonymous, but this allows us to kind of gear the conversation to who's in the audience. Who's in the audience today? What is your role at your school? Are you an owner, instructor, administrator? Hey, I'm just starting a school. I don't even know what my role is yet, or other. And go ahead and answer. Take a couple seconds. Amy and Charles, this should be a fun play. I think we've got I see some names. Tom Longmore in there from Orlando, Florida. I see Rosa. I see people on here who have some chops in the education business. So this is going to be fun. All right. I'll go ahead and end the poll, and then wow, we got a perfect, well, almost a perfect split. How about this? We got a pretty heavy load. I'm going to share the results, everybody. How about this? Almost 70% of the people on here are instructors themselves. So like I told you guys, was we were prepping for this, like there's going to be some there's going to be some people in here with some chops that understand, instruction and what it means. And I think they might be looking for some insight on how do they really understand when they hire somebody, how they can move the needle in their business. And I think they're going to be looking for that insight from you. So owners, 8%, instructors, 69%, administrator, 8%, starting a school, 8%, good for you for being here. And then other, 8%. Here's what we do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by asking you guys a question. All right. So, and the question I want to ask is, maybe start with Amy and Charles for sure. We can all play along here, but you know, when you're looking at, because Amy, I know you manage a pretty large staff of instructors across the whole country, and when evaluating really potential in instructors, if I'm going to go hire a new one, what are the top traits that immediately kind of comes to mind and would signal for you a strong hire versus a risky hire as an instructor? And I would love for you to just kind of share your open thoughts on that.
Sure. I'm happy to answer. So what I start with is, of course, looking at the resume. Resume is great, tells me what they've done, but I need to actually talk to that person to see what they know and how they come across. And so a resume gives me a starting point to say that's what I'm looking for in an instructor. But when I reach out to them and we start to have conversations, then I can figure out, what are their communication skills? How are they relating to me as we're talking, whether it's on the phone and it's our first, or we're having an in-person chat? Do they have enthusiasm? Are they excited? Are they excited to meet me? Are they excited to talk about school? Are they excited about students? And probably the most important thing when I'm looking at them is, are they open to coaching and feedback? When we're discussing things and I say, oh, well, how did that work out for you? Or they give me an example of something that happened in a classroom, because there's no classroom that's perfect. Something always happens in a classroom and you have to be ready for that. So if you throw them like an oddball question and they just sort of sit there and think about it, that lets me know in a situation in a classroom, they may not be ready to pull the trigger to take a student somewhere else and get them off the rabbit trail, as it happens to be. So it's just really a connection. How are they connecting with you? Because you're their first line to a student. And so we never want to practice on our students, and we want to make sure that they're communicating and they're passionate and they're excited to be there.
So Mary asks a really good question. I like your answer, by the way, because I think what I hear is, can they engage you even in an interview? Because I think we all know the reason people go to in-person education is to feel engaged, submersed in the educational experience. It's appointment education. You go for live education. Everything else is secondary, right? You get into that environment and you want to be engaged. Nothing worse than not being engaged, and you're in there like, oh my God, I got to sit here for another 7 hours, right? Nobody wants that. But Mary asked a really interesting question. And Mary, I get you. I used to do all the hiring of the instructors, and I'd get hundreds of resumes. So Mary asked questions before you even give the interview, Amy. What do you have to see in a resume that gets you to go, swipe right, as opposed, I don't know how that dating stuff goes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How does that go? How do you swipe
So,
right on somebody?
So for me to swipe right on you as an instructor, I need to see that you have longevity in real estate. You know something about real estate. Not necessarily does it have to be real estate, but maybe I'm looking for someone who can teach finance, or they know math really well. And so that's a different song suit. So I need to know who I'm looking for first. And then the second thing that I'm looking for is, do they sell real estate currently? Because if they sell real estate currently and they're an instructor, that's golden to start with, because they're up to date on current information, and they have stories that they can relate to students that are current, because nobody wants an instructor that talks about something that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Real estate today is very different than 20 years ago. And then I want to see, some states require specific educational background. Other states do not. But I want to see, do they have a CDEI? Are they certified distance education instructor? Do they Do they have a GSI? Do they have anything in addition to just being an instructor and an agent that makes them stand out for someone else?
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Well, I think that's good advice. So, are they invested in the industry? And I would imagine that if you were hiring somebody for a specialty class on mortgage financing, they wouldn't have to be a real estate, they'd be a mortgage expert, but they've been in the business and they got the chops. And not only that, but how do you stand out? Well, do you have those designations? Do you have a CDEI, certified distance education instructor? Do you have something else that is, I did a program for 6 years, da 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 da, looking for something that helps you actually stand out. That because, and I see Charles nod his head too. So Charles, you teach a lot of real estate licensing, and one of the things I know we require, Amy, is kind of this domain authority, this expert. Are you an expert in your domain? And so what I would tell somebody on a resume is, can you demonstrate a domain authority on your resume? If I'm looking for something specific and you can demonstrate that you got that authority and you got the chops as a an instructor who can deliver that, that's what you're looking for. I mean, right there, I think is the whole package on a resume.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say that having a real estate license is only the beginning. I would be looking for leadership within their firms, because that tells me that they're dedicated, they have experience beyond themselves. So they're picking up the experiences of the agents behind them when they have leadership in their firms. So that is always a huge check mark for me when I see that on the resume.
Ah, good point. I like that. Yeah, keep your questions coming, everybody. I am looking at the chat also. So, um, how can owners, operators, schools effectively assess like the soft skills? As you get into this and you start to, Amy, when you're going through this interview process and you're starting to engage, right? Communication during the hiring process. What are do you have like just a couple traits? Like if somebody's going to walk out here today and go, man, they did not trip those three things, Amy said about, assessing soft skills of somebody, because we know that when you're in a live environment, especially in person, there's no there's not 800 miles between you and the customer. They're right there in the front row, and real life happens right there in the classroom. And those soft skills are critical to what, you can lose an entire class in a second. What do you how do you effectively assess those soft skills? How do you press somebody on that?
So what we do and what's worked really well for us is we have an interview. We talk to the candidate, we get them set up, and they come in and they present for a panel of us. There's 4 or 5 of us, depending on the day, that the instructor, we give them a slideshow of what we're looking for them to teach. We have 5 different things they can choose from, but we provide the slides for them. And then we say, okay, now teach it to us. And we act like we're students, where we do everything online. We get in the chat, we ask questions, we ask them clarifying questions about what they're teaching. We put them on the spot. And that's how we can pretty much gauge how an instructor is going to feel about a class. Can they use technology, right? Because being in person and teaching live online are 2 different things. Those are 2 different skill sets that you need to think about when you're hiring someone. So if you're in person, you're looking for one thing, and you're looking for that one-on-one in a classroom setting. And can they command the class? Do they walk? Do they do all the things that you want them to do to be engaging? And then online, it's the same thing. I'm looking not necessarily to trip them up in a question, but we do ask things like, well, what is an estate at will? Can you give me an example of that? And if that's something that they're teaching on, they give us examples. One thing we can also see, we can see how they interact with the chat, so we know if they're good on technology, because that's a big thing. So we need to know, how well did they get in themselves? Are they doing well with the chat? Are they answering the chat? Are they following along? And then, are they reading from a script? Because they have this whole thing AI'd out, and they are reading from a script. And reading from a script is great. Everybody has notes. That's wonderful. I love somebody comes in with notes and is prepared, but you can't read from a script. because that's why we ask you chat questions, and we can tell when they're reading from a script because they'll interact with the chat one way and it's like, oh yeah, Mary, thanks so much for asking that question. That's great. Okay, now back to what we were saying. And then they start reading again. And everybody in there is like, I'm done,
Yeah.
background messaging. We're
Out.
finished.
Yeah.
Like this is it. Because we want to see you and we want to see how you interact with us. And I'm famous for turning my camera off so they can't see me.
Oh,
And I have my back turned to them because I don't want to see them, but I want to hear them. If I'm, students have learned by different things. They
so
learn,
so
every
when they're
student
doing
learns
this,
differently.
when they're doing this audition presentation, because that's what you're talking about, nobody goes in unless they pass an audition, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you give them here's five different set pieces. You pick whichever one you want. You
Mhm.
come in, you present, right? Demonstrate your authority, demonstrate your ability to answer questions. Don't read, uh, and then you literally just listen to them as opposed to watching them to see if they
Mhm.
really have the communication chops. It sounds like what you're looking for, those
A
skills.
100%, 100%. And I turn my back to them so they can't see me and I'm not looking at them. But if I'm an audible learner, like some students are, I'm not paying attention to what they're doing. I may be working while they're talking,
Yeah, yeah.
but they need to keep my attention so that I'm paying attention. And so that's what I'm looking for when I'm interviewing. It's just the communication across the board.
Charles, what did Amy do when she interviewed you or when you did your audition?
I showed up to my audition in a full tux suit.
She did.
Did you really?
She
Yes,
did.
I
Yeah.
did. I was very excited to be there. I could not get a school to call me back. So when I finally did get one to call me back, I showed up ready to perform. And they put me in
Sweet.
front of a live class, which is not something I expected, but I was able to actually perform and I was able to explain disclosure laws. I still have that presentation in the back of my head. But the big thing about it was there was a system behind it. They told me, here's what you're going to do. Here's what you need to do if you want to work for us. And since I knew what was expected of me, I could prep for it and I could actually perform.
Oh, beautiful.
But
So
he
sit
wasn't
down
prepared
with
the day that I went to watch him because he was teaching and I drove to watch him. And I showed up and he froze and he looked at me and nobody else knew who I was. And he was like, do I keep teaching? I was like, yep, we're going to go to lunch after this. It's fine. Go ahead.
That's fantastic. So I think about this, and I think about these soft skills. My experience when I started really way back at Kaplan, it was actually a different school that was bought by Kaplan called ProSource in Minnesota in 2002. I went in for an audition. They did auditions there too, and I had to do an audition. And the owner of the school, who had just sold to Kaplan, I didn't even know they just sold, but he's in the audience and he's playing the role, right? They all used to pick straws who got to be the bad cop, the good cop, the troubled student, the happy student. And he was the bad cop. And I said something about, the reason I got into real estate was because I was, my family had done it. Da, da, da. I went to college to go, pre-law. I was going to be a lawyer, but then I read some articles and it wasn't a very well received profession and career to be a lawyer. So I thought I'd do, something a little bit better, and I did real estate. And he stops and he's sitting in the audience and he's like, I don't appreciate that. He just didn't even raise his hand or anything. He stopped me in the middle of my thing, and I said, I'm sorry, what's that? And he goes, my father's an attorney. I don't appreciate comments like his dad was not an attorney, but he nailed me in my audition and I'm like, backtrack, backtrack, backtrack as fast as I could. But I recovered, and said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend. I was more of a joke. He says, well, I didn't find the joke funny. And so I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm going to move on. But those are the kind of things that you need an instructor who, because people make mistakes, people say the wrong thing. We all know if you've been in this business long enough, you've seen that evaluation, you've gotten that phone call. Your instructor was insensitive. Your instructor, offended. Your instructor, some of those things that I think about because usually I don't get that until it's fully escalated, right? And then it's a hot, hot, burning hot potato. There are those signs you have to look for. And one thing we've always said is, and I would suggest to anybody hiring instructors, uh, is uh, you can't put your students in harm's way. You can't put somebody you know who can create problems in the classroom and create problems for students in their experience, especially if they're taking the time to come to live education or to do live online education, appointment education. I should just be, you have to be extra sensitive to that. And I know one of the things we say is you need to be the most compassionate, correct person in the room when you're an instructor at Kaplan. And so look at Steven's like, I would not have found that funny either. Yeah, no, I don't think anybody found it funny, Steven. I kind of bombed that part of my audition. I still got the job, but uh, so anyhow, let's do this. What are some common hiring mistakes you guys have made? Well, that you see schools when selecting a real estate instructor. And
They go
any
for the
tips?
names. They go for the names. They're looking in their market and they hire the name. The
Oh, the big hitter in the market, maybe, or somebody who's,
star star, yeah, the rock star agent. They hire the right rock star agent thinking they're going to be a great instructor, and
yeah,
they're not because they're great at sales, but maybe they're not great at the interpersonal skills that are required with it. So, and then the other part is ignoring coachability. That's a common hire. You feel like you can change them. I can change. I can make it better. I can work. I can work with them. I can make this work. And you find out very quickly, no, they are who they are, and that's not changing for you or anybody else.
Yeah, and I would also add ignoring like transaction coordinators and administrators. Those are people who normally have access to high volume transactions. They normally are exposed to any mistakes that the agents are making. So they have a lot of life experience in it, teaching it the right way. So people who necessarily have their license but maybe aren't the lead on their team, those are excellent sources for instructors.
interesting. Yeah, the problem solve. The people that have to teach other people on the team how to do things. People who teach. Selling, there are some people who sell brilliantly as they teach as they sell. There are those golden nuggets too. But you're right. There are people who take care of and have the soft skills on the team as opposed to the blazers sometimes. That's super interesting. And I do think back to our greatest instructors over time were not necessarily the biggest hitters in their markets at all. That's super interesting. Well, Charles, as a national lead instructor at Kaplan, you deal with the training of these instructors that come on. And so from your experience, right, for everybody here in the audience, um, what behaviors do you kind of look for, or what behaviors consistently set five-star instructors apart, you know, in the classroom? What because everybody here, you can put a marketing ad in the paper, you can send out an all call to say, hey, we're looking for instructors. But, when you're in that hiring process and you're even in the, early part of somebody's career as an instructor, you get to see those people who kind of rise quickly. And there are those who rise quickly. What do you think those five-star, instructors, what are some of the behaviors that you consistently see in those people?
I would say probably the most important behavior is preparation. We see that pretty evident very quickly. How much are you reviewing slides before you present them to us? Are you asking questions before you're presenting slides? That lets me know that you're working through and you're actually giving some thought on what you're going to present. And this goes for instructors who have decades of experience and instructors who are just starting out. That preparation piece is vital for everyone on that spectrum. Because if you prepare properly, your brain is now freed up to freely engage with the audience. Your brain is able to sort of pick up with those distractions because the information is already in there, and you're not also trying to read or remember what you wanted to say. Uh, like Mary is saying in the chat, I see the chat box going up, and you're presenting and talking about transaction coordinators and administrators. It's because that thought has already been solidified in the brain from preparation. So you can take that information from the audience or take that information from the students and still engage them, right? That's incredibly important. And I would also say, besides preparation, is flexibility. If your audio goes out in a classroom, or if the projector's not working when you're teaching live online, how are you going to pivot? How do you bounce back from that? If something goes wrong when we're interviewing someone, I never hold that against them. I'm more focused on how do they respond to it. If their computer is not working, that happens. Life, is always, it's what happens when we're busy making plans. But do you let that derail the entire interview? Or do you pivot and say, this is what we're going to do, and here's how we're still going to get through the information? That is a five-star instructor that I'm looking for.
Beautiful. Amy, anything to add to that? Love that.
I'm gonna ditto what he said, that you have to teach no matter what. They showed up for you.
Yeah.
And even if you have to pull a whiteboard from behind you because the slides are not working,
Yeah.
and you're just writing down math and you're getting through it, that effort shows. They love that, because now everything is stopped. You could have stopped, but you said, you know what? You took your time here to come here today for me. I'm going to give you the same respect, and I'm going to continue to teaching. So if they can overcome obstacles like that, I know we're good. We're golden. We just need to get them up on whatever else that may be lacking, but their preparation is there, and the rest of it's just easy.
I love it. I love the preparation part, right? I mean, there's always there's the personality and character that which I think is important to, to come across and be able to deliver. But preparation, you know what used to be the kiss of death for me if a potential new instructor told me something. The line was, I said, "So how do you feel in front of a crowd?" "Oh, they don't bother me. I don't get nervous." And I'd be like, you know what happens when people say that? But this has been my experience. Somebody in the chat, throw it up there if you've seen something different. But people who don't get nervous before they go to speak, they generally don't put the amount of preparation it takes in order to actually nail it. And so those are the guys that would go in and wing it, and it would show because other people are preparing. Especially if you do team teaching or you have, the students have an opportunity to sit in front of somebody else who is prepared and does have all those character traits that they have, but they're prepared. World of difference. World of difference. I think about you said that surviving uh, surviving difficulties and bringing students on the journey with you. It's a skill in itself. One of the highest ratings I ever got when I taught real estate licensing was when the power went out in the building. And I did the entire rest of the hour without power just from memory, right? And then asked him, "What's the next on the notes?" "Oh yeah, that." So here's what we're going to talk about, as opposed to having the PowerPoints up. And the class loved it. They all felt like they were in it. When you can do that, then you know you've kind of arrived. And so I love that the adversity part. How can instructors adapt? Like, let's say you're pretty good. You're somebody who prepares a lot. And as a matter of fact, you know what I want to do? I'm going to ask that question in a second. How to think about this question while I'm going to throw up a poll question. How can instructors adapt their teaching style to better connect with today's real estate agents? I know we got a lot of instructors been around a long time, and sometimes it's difficult to connect with some of the newer students coming in to real estate. So think about that. But I'm going to ask a quick poll question of everybody because I think we'd want to know, when you're teaching live, what kind of live education do you offer at your school or do you want to offer at your school? Is it in person or is it live online or is it both? So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. It's up. It's what method of delivery? What method of live delivery does your school offer? In person, live online, or both in person and live online? Be interesting to know, and we could talk a little bit about those two bits too as we go forward. So this is pretty overwhelmingly one-sided so far. If you're on your phone, you're not seeing the poll question, you may need to swipe your screen to the side. So go ahead and just check your phone if you're on your phone. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll. It's overwhelming. Share the results. We got people who are doing both in person and live online. I got some who are only doing in person. So 20% are doing in person. So both or in person. Nobody's just doing live online. I think that's interesting, actually. Super cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And let's jump on that question. So you get somebody, this is that coaching part, right? Charles, this is how you work with people, right? And because I think the question comes down to it. Can you really change the spots on a zebra? I mean, can you really So how can instructors adapt their style to better connect with today's real estate students? Especially, let's talk about the virtual side, the live online side, maybe.
Mhm.
And you can apply it to in person too. I think they probably overlap a little bit, but
Yeah.
what do you think?
I would say paramount would be bringing personality and being yourself to the material. We spoke earlier about reading the script or focusing and sort of making sure your delivery is very robotic. Being yourself and actually bringing some personality, your own experiences. John mentioned, or excuse me, Jeffrey mentioned earlier in the chat, bringing your own real world experiences. That's what's making it valuable for the people who come to the class. I can print out a set of slides. I can get the information in a written format. I could even load that information into an AI chatbot and have it give me something interesting. But at the same time, I'm in a live class to hear from a live person to hear what they bring to it. So
Yeah.
really don't be afraid to be yourself when you're presenting. That's really going to help in an online environment. I make all kinds of jokes in class. I make mistakes too, and I own them, and that's what makes us uniquely human, and that's what makes it not a video you're watching on YouTube, for example. And then the other thing that I would say for the virtual environment that I work with instructors when we're training and we're working through this is responsibility. And what I mean by that is take responsibility for the learning outcomes in your classroom.
Mm.
uh, I will have instructors who will say things like, well, Charles, the students don't engage. And so I will challenge them and I will say, well, instead of saying the students don't engage, let's change it ever so slightly. And let's ask, why aren't the students engaging in my class? So let's
Mhm.
change that wording just a little bit so we can take responsibility for what can we do differently to change that outcome. I say this to you. I had a class earlier today, 5 students, none of them said a peep in the online environment. They were all very willing to sit quietly and listen to me. So what I did, I asked a question and we didn't move forward until we got an answer. And finally, one of them got uncomfortable enough to go, okay, okay, here's your answer. Sometimes you have to wait them out and you have to draw that engagement out. I haven't gotten my feedback for that class yet, but I hope the feedback's pretty
You put
positive.
me on the spot. Not everybody likes that either, but I hear you though. What I think I heard you say though is how do you get them to feel that the outcome of the class is their responsibility? I think we've seen this before. I mean, I've seen this before where somebody says, "Yeah, the content. I didn't create the content. I'm just a teacher." I'm sorry, but you know what? That may be true, but you need to be, and they need to have the understanding that, and when you're live, you are responsible for what happens. You are responsible for engaging the students. You are responsible for the outcomes. If you taught a class all week and 90% of your students failed their final exam, what does that tell you? There's got to be it. It ain't the content at that point. You've had them for 30 hours, 40 hours, right? And so that responsibility, I think, is key. And I love the fact that when you hit on, bringing your own character, I think Jeff says in the chats, it's important to make it related using real life examples. Real life examples are where your character comes out in a class, which ties it all the way back to the beginning when Amy says, I like it when people got chops. They understand the business. They've worked in the business because that means they probably have stories to help relate people to the practical application of the concepts being delivered. Um, and that brings out character. Who are
Well,
you?
and when someone does say, well, the material's boring, the material's just dry. Like I'm teaching statutes. How are you boring? Are you dry? Because I can be funny no matter what. And so that's how you win them over. Okay, it's dry. Let's play a little game. Have you ever? Have you ever had a student or had this scenario come up? Who's had it? And you engage them somehow, some way to make them understand we're in this together. The material's dry, but I'm not. I'm here with you. And if I have to be here, we're going to have a good time. And so that's what we're looking for. And then one thing that we do on a regular for all instructors, not new instructors, every instructor. I'm talking about Charles. I will be in it myself this summer because I'm giving a presentation later that I need to practice on myself. We have weekly practice sessions with instructors. We don't want them to practice on our students. We want them to practice in front of us where if they make a mistake, they can stop and they can go, wait, that's not what I meant to say. This is what I meant to do. And then we give feedback. We give constructive feedback on not everyone. Certain ones are picked to give the feedback about how they did. And that lets them know maybe I need to work a little bit harder. I don't understand the examples I tried to give myself. I'm not going to use this when I do it. And so just continuing to have them prepare is helpful for them and you as an owner or an administrator to know where your instructors are, what they're lacking, or what they're great at that you didn't even know about. So
I
it's
can't
it's a constant evaluation.
I can't tell you how many instructors that we've done auditions with failed during the review, right? Where you give them their evaluation, and we're talking through evaluations. No, I didn't. I didn't do that. I no, I can't believe no. Well, I don't think you're right with that. Here's how why I think, and they literally can't take the constructive feedback. I tell everybody that, here's the thing for all of our attendees here, that instant feedback from your customers is the most important feedback you're going to get. And it's about what's happening in your classroom. It's about what is your product really doing with those students? And it's so awesome. In fact, one of these great leaders that I've had at Kaplan, the guy who owned the business that I joined, the guy who asked me that tough question about my dad's a lawyer, he says, listen to your customers and give them what they want. It's an easy business if you do that. And if your customers are telling you your instructors aren't cutting it, you need a new instructors. And if your instructors can't take that immediate feedback about their performance and change their performance, that's a problem. We talk about it all the time. You only have instructor problems when you don't have enough instructors. Because if somebody isn't going to change and take feedback properly, then it's time to next up. And that sounds kind of harsh, but that is really it. You can't afford, right? You can't afford to be practicing on your students when somebody who just keeps practicing the wrong thing over and over. Do it once, but don't do it 40 times.
We will remove instructors based off of feedback, or we will pull them briefly and just say, hey, we need you to meet with Charles. Charles is going to coach you through some things on your feedback that you received. It's also the pay rate. Uh,
Yeah.
sometimes the pay rate does matter. It's indicative of the state and what's what's happening with the state, Jeff. So I don't disagree with you on that.
Yeah. I have a
But
thought on that.
it's the coachability and
Mhm.
having them recognize somebody's paying attention to what I'm doing is, you know, is also part of it. If they're not coachable, it's a bigger problem than probably what you realize.
Yeah. What do you, I know we're just coming up to time here, everybody, but so ask your questions if you want. But, the pay rate's an interesting thing. Pay rate, I've had it before. We've had, Amy, we've had superstar instructors that, we have to wave goodbye to because they literally price themselves out of what we can afford to pay. And they're tremendous, and that's got to be okay. You got to be okay with that too, I think, because if you're an instructor, you want to get paid as much as you can. I get that, but if you're operating or owning a school, you realize that I can't pay somebody more than what I can do a profitable business on. Now, if that person's a superstar that people will drive by the competition to come to you, and you can load classrooms up, 100, 200, 300, 500 if it's continuing education, then you know what you can pay somebody. But there are times when people price themselves right out of being able to work with you. That does happen, and that you got to be okay with that if you're worried about the business. Um, but otherwise, I have not necessarily found that the more you pay somebody, the better they become. They kind of got to have the drive. They kind of got to have everything in the beginning. So. Great. So any closing thoughts, Amy, Charles?
I would just say one of the things that really elevates a instructor from standard baseline to 5 star is a growth mindset.
Mm,
They're always looking to improve. They're always looking at their feedback with an eye of how can I adjust? How can I improve? How can I make the experience better? And the same way a real estate agent is always going to showings and always reviewing the market, an instructor should always be in class, always looking at other presenters and speakers so that they can up their game. That's the key to success.
love that.
Agree.
Love that. Well, I want to thank you both for being here, Amy, Charles. You're important people for what we do. I think we've shared a lot of information today for everybody. Everybody, thank you for attending our Dearborn Partner webinar today. We appreciate you and wish you all the best of luck. If you have any more comments or questions, absolutely feel free to contact Dearborn for any questions. I know that this video will be available to you in a couple days. You can share it with your teams if you'd like. And thank you for participating. Have a great day, everybody.